the board was always very, very sensitive to water rates, but yet we're trying to be cognizant of the rising cost or Edison or chemicals, and it's imperative that we at least break even on this matter. And as such, we felt some time ago the importance of trying to look into it as much as we can and being accurate. And so the board, the committee recommended and the board approved hiring a consultant to do a water rate study. And they've spent many months in conjunction with staff to review our present cost, estimate what our future cost may be, and come up with realistic recommendations for this year and years to come, so our customers have a guideline what to expect for their future building and rates. And staff, there's a recommendation, and that's based upon a study from our consultant. So probably at this time, Mr. President, it would probably be appropriate to ask to hear from our staff on this.
That's a good idea, Dan.
And he met, talked about the work that Raptellus did to help us plot out our future and the water rates into the future. We did we had a workshop with customers. It was well attended. I think we had 20 representatives here. We talked about the rate. We talked about what was included in the rate. Dwayne made a presentation, and we talked about a lot of different aspects of it. And I think the bottom line, we came up with a recommendation. So, I mean, we can have Dwayne go through the presentation, or we can kind of give you the bottom line on it. I think to keep the agency on a good financial basis and to cover our costs, our treatment costs, we're looking at about, well, in fact, it's a 7.25%, so a 7.25% increase in water rates, and a slight modification. We had a summer rate and a winter rate, and we were going to eliminate those two rates and just have one rate. So, so it would be the rates are in the package, and we did talk about opportunities for recharge and encouraging recharge when it's available. One of the issues is we're so low in San Luis and in Oroville right now. Our allocation is likely to be very late in the year. Our opportunities for recharge this year are probably going to be late in the season, and there's a lot of things I think we could flesh out as far as how the program would work, how our customers could participate, because we did find that customers are very interested in working on that, but at this point we have still a lot of pieces that need to kind of fall into place before we put a dry year program, recharge program together. So I think our staff recommendation at this point is the 7.25%. I can't have Dwayne go through the presentation, or we have a representative from Raptellus here to answer questions how we got to that point. Whatever your
the recommendation was 7 3/4% with a 0.5% for recharge to build it into the rate as part of the rate. It started this year, and this has been changed. Okay, from what has been. The committee has made a recommendation, and our consultant has spent many, many hours. I have spent I can't tell you how many tens, maybe 100 hours on this subject matter. And what I'm really upset about here is nobody's listening. This board is not listening when they come to these meetings or listening to our consultant. And one of the biggest things that I'm upset with this thing is this. Edison has told us they're raising the rates anywhere from 5% to 10% every year for the next 5 years. Okay? And we keep on chiseling off from other parts of this agency to make it look like the rates are lower. We need to face the fact. We need to keep the infrastructure going, and we need to compile in our budget a category that says this is for recharge money, but we're not doing that. It's buried into our rate. It needs to be separated, showing that this is our agency cost of doing business, and then there should be a line item that says for recharge money. We need to start putting in hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars of money in that category. So when, if I hope this year that God does allow a heavy storm that floods all of Northern California, that we can put in, if maybe an act of God, 30,000 acre-feet of water, if it's available, okay? If we go with this budget here, or this rate right now, that means we're gonna be pulling money from somewhere else because the water is available. But I came in here tonight, it was 7.75%, that's what I'm supposed to hear tonight, and I'm hoping that's what I've been told. Now, if your recommendation changes our consultant, then I want to hear that, but I want to know why that it has.
Mr. President, I think it would be worthwhile if we did have that full presentation. And the 7 1/4, the 7 3/4, they've been both talked of. The 7 1/4 meets our current needs. The other 0.5% that would be for recharge, and I don't think that's forgotten. It just needs to be looked at and studied a little bit further. But the recharge, it may or may not need to be a component of the water rate, but that's still something that's still an action item, something that needs to be reviewed. But the 7 1/4, it appears that it meets our present needs absent recharge.
Can we see the presentation, Pete?
Certainly, yeah, I'll have Dwayne walk through the presentation.
There we go. Okay. Just as an overview of the items that are going to be covered in this presentation, we are going to speak about the water operations and budget, the proposed revenue adjustments, projected debt coverage ratios. As you know, it's very important to maintain a proper debt coverage ratio. That drives some of the rate components. Our proposed operating and financial plan, the proposed rates, and any discussion or questions you may have at that time. One of the, some of the water operations aspects for 2015 is, the drought is the agency is going to be pumping a lot more groundwater than it has, because we don't anticipate we're going to be receiving the type of Table A water that we have received in the past because of the very dry conditions. This financial plan is based on costs that are contained in our 2015 adopted budget. If 2015 remains dry and the agency has to acquire more expensive, more costly water resources, as the board has been briefed in the past, we have 2 or 3 different categories of water resources, and these, as we move up those tier of those water resources, there are additional costs that may be included in the program, and we just wanted to say that these costs are likely going to be part of a dry year water program, and that rate would have to compensate for those increased costs, and that's in order to maintain that coverage ratio and recover those costs. So that's an item that is yet to be determined, but we want to make sure that the board was aware that this is for, the water resources that we have at hand that are within our ability to use this next year. The agency is going to update that plan every year, so there's always a financial or always a 5-year plan looking forward, taking into effect the changing conditions. And want to highlight some of the differences between the 2015 projections that we made just a year ago and the adopted 2015 budget. And most of these are associated with the drought. The agency is planning to sell 12,500 acre-feet less water in 2015 than we had projected. So this results in a little over $6.4 million in reduced revenue from water sales. There's also, because we are using more groundwater to supplement that, there's an increased pumping cost of a little over $1 million, and a corresponding operation maintenance cost of a little less than $900,000. The state water contract costs have also increased by about $1 million from what we had projected for 2015. So but on the positive side, I guess, or to counterbalance those increasing costs, are some savings associated with if you get less water delivered, you don't have to pay the electricity costs for bringing that water over to the Tehachapi's. So there's $5.8 million that begins to offset some of those costs. Also, our tax revenue has increased from what we had projected by a little more than $3.1 million. So for 2015, we have a balanced budget where our revenues and our expenditures are balanced, and we're also projecting a 2016 water sales at the same rate of 45,000 acre-feet. Revenues and about $51 million or a little bit more. And expenses, you have $228,000 that is kind of left over for reserves if the budget was to be exactly as we show it here. Obviously, there'll be a little bit of revision in the costs and the revenues. There is also about $1.9 million that's going to be forwarded into our equipment replacement fund to cover, replacement of equipment that is old and needs replacement. Plan from 14 to 2018 with the revenue adjustments there, and you can see that we categorize the operating costs in the financial plan. The light blue are the costs, kind of local costs here at AVEK. The dark blue are the DWR costs, and you can see those are projected to increase while our local costs stay relatively stable. And there's a modest balance of those 5 areas. But even with that, there's a 7.5% rate increase that is anticipated over the next 5 years in order to maintain currently where we are at the present time.
Okay, so these are the things we're talking about, so, and you want to point this out?
Sure. I'll be happy to do that, Director. For 2014, there was an adopted 7.5% rate adjustment. For 2015, there is a 7.25 adjustment that is necessary in order to maintain our financial health and maintain our bond debt ratio. And there is a discussion or proposal on a 0.5% increase for water banking, and so that's included in this particular calculation here. And so it shows those, and we project based on what we know at the present time for 2016, 2017, 2018, additional rate adjustments of 7.5% in order to maintain our bond debt ratios and our revenues based on our projected expenses. So if we move to the next line, you can see that...
I need to stop you there, it's very important. One of the reasons why the rates are going up is that for us to keep a double bond rating, that we have to show the increase of this water rate to show that we can pay back the bonds, or we will lower our bond rate. Can somebody elaborate on that?
Sure, be happy to. This slide here actually shows that bond to debt coverage ratio that we project, and you can see here that the red line is the minimum that's, it's 100% that's required. We do need to have a 1.25% minimum bond to debt coverage ratio, and you can see here that we're hovering right about 1.29%, and 27%, and 126%, 127%. So, the rate adjustments and the bond ratio kind of work hand in hand. You can get a greater bond ratio if you increase your revenue sources, but this is a balance between those two. And one of the reasons why this bond to debt ratio is a little bit lower than what we have experienced in the past is because of the board action to do some reserve funds for water rates and other things that allows us to have a lower bond debt ratio of 1.5. So this aids us in maintaining our rate structure.
And on top of that, the finance committee spent a lot of time on this, because if we don't keep the bond rating up, then the letter of credits we're getting, the good deals we got on the letter of credit would go up, because our letter of credit, we saved the agency $300,000 by keeping our bond rating up. Is that?
Yes.
I see heads bobbing and.
You're exactly correct.
Okay.
And this rate structure is designed in order to maintain our credit rating and so that we can continue to have good credit references and others as we move forward with our capital programs and any future bond indebtedness that the agency may want. So as indicated, 7.25, this is the bare minimum that's needed for the financial plan and to maintain our bond debt ratio. There is the 0.5% that's proposed for water banking, and we also discussed, Dan mentioned that the committee recommended that we limit the summer winter rates and those incentives to a single year.
I'm really confused. This paperwork does not make any sense. I show on here on the graphs, you look at the graph on the page, go from prior to it. That says, right, no, the one prior to that, right there, it says right there, 7.5, in 2015, it's going to be 7.75. How do we give ourselves a discount by 0.5%? I don't understand this.
This graph reflects the recommendations that the Water Rates Committee made when they discussed the rates moving forward for 2015. So we adjusted this.
We can make all the recommendations, we're all smart people on here. I appreciate where they all come from. But if our consultant says something a little different and kind of, looks out for us and our agency, because that's where we hire these people, if that's what it's supposed to be or be close to that, I think we should take the recommendation from our consultants, because we're not the consultant in this capacity, so maybe we need to take a look at that. I'm really nervous of dropping that thing to 7.25 when I'm seeing graphs here, 7.5 next year. It already tells us we should be at 7 minimum right now, with even the 0.5%, it should be 7.75. Okay, can somebody, like I asked my consultant, explain that graph to me right there.
Yeah, this is to go ahead and, if you have the will, if you desire to go ahead and approve the 7.75, that allows the agency to maintain or be above the minimum debt service corporation for the full 5 years.
And that's because in case there's any human error, that it kind of protects us as a buffer a little bit to have that extra percentage.
And as Dwayne and Dana had mentioned, that you're going to review this on an annual basis. So as you review the amount of the cost for that you're going to put in the budget for water banking, we will incorporate that once that amount is decided upon, and then at that point, our projections and recommendations will be updated because of that.
Yep.
I'm assuming I would probably be almost 100% sure that if those additional costs go into your are recommended, that we'll definitely have to update and recommend different revenue increases.
Nobody's saying that it should not be more than 7.25, but we're saying at this time that 7.25 meets our financial needs. And as far as water banking, yes, that probably needs to be done. How it needs to be done and what percentage, that's going to take a little bit more study, and it's probably not prudent to try to approve that tonight, it needs to be looked at, a little more input from our customers, and see how many are interested in participating in water banking, who's gonna receive the water, and the mechanics of it. So Greg, it's not that, we're not saying that these items shouldn't be done, but we're not ready at this time to do that 7.75 when we don't have the mechanics of how it's gonna be used. And one thing we've gotta be, careful about is the more we raise these, water rates, there's gonna be at some point, and it's already happening fast, where people are taking lawns out and not using, the water. And the higher these rates go, the less water it's gonna be, used per capita, and we're gonna have to raise it higher and higher and higher. We're entering into something that's gonna be, I don't know if we'll ever catch up from it, but we say we need 7.75 or whatever it may be, but, we've never done any studies, nor the consultant, any studies, what effects that's gonna have. But, basically, you sound pretty bureaucratic, like a lot of people. They don't look at the total picture. You raise it, you raise it up. Well, what effect's that gonna have? How many people are gonna let their lawns go? So, and what's the recommendation next year? We go up 10%? And we've got to look at this every year. So it's an ongoing, but you're looking at just a portion of it right there. And you're not looking, and it will happen. It is already happening. You drive around and see the number of people who are taking the lawns out. It's happening fairly, rapidly, right now. So, so 7.25 meets our current, to the best of our knowledge, and say it's a budget. Things happen, rates can change, a lot of things can change, but to the best of our knowledge at this time, 7.25, and I'm not really very proud as a chairman to recommend 7.25, inflation is approximately 2%, but I do see that these are actual costs, and most of it's passed on from the state, most of it's passed on from our chemicals and from the Edison Company. We have very little to say about this budget. The amount that the board and staff controls is minute, and these are pass-ons. But it's got to be done. But that's still so much higher than what the inflation is. But do we have to do it? Yeah, we've got to do it.
Budgeted. There's another thing that our manager is not built into this, is that the governor and legislators have gone ahead and raised our, going to be an environmental state tax starting January 1st of 2015. That's going to raise gas across the board 50 cents to $1, which is budgeted in there, on there. Also, Dan has not mentioned, there's going to be a $2 million potential shortage of power costs from the state water project. He's waiting to, as president of the state water contractors, trying to figure out what that number is going to be. That's not in the budget. And what I'm saying is that we're not putting the 5%, George, just to let you know that's 100% what Edison's raising the rate. Has nothing to do with anything else. Am I close to that as a 5%?
Yeah, that's
Is
what,
that,
we have that.
Edison has come out publicly and told all the agencies, we're raising your power rate 5%. So we're working on a 2.25%. You know what? We're nickel and diming this thing here.
Yeah, Frank, I think we can meet your concerns. We adopt resolution, whatever happens to you after we finish with the hearing, but just with the provision that referred back to the water rates committee, and to study as far as what a proper water banking rate should be and the mechanics of it, and we report back to work in 60 days. So we can accomplish it today.
Our consultant here is.
But we got to continue on.
That's right. Okay, then I'm gonna make a motion that we support the 7.75, because that's what our consultant has in this book. Also on the next page, go ahead, I'm sorry, go to the next page. Keep on going. He has it right there on the top. It shows an adjustment for 2015. That's what I'm going after. My expert is 7.75, and I'm not going below that.
We have a public hearing.
Okay.
0.5% for water banking. Maybe that half a percent should have been called dry water programs, because I know many of our customers, if we come back with a dry water program that's now more costly, they got to go back to their supervisors or their group and say, hey, we need to come up with more money. And it would be really kind of nice to build the dry water program into our water rate, so it's not an additional cost, even if these are rebated back to them at the end of the year. But it seems like we should be working more towards including a dry water rate, which is still way beyond what the committee, and I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, but there's a lot of mechanics, and that's why it would be appropriate to come back in 60 days.
Well, I just, if that 0.5% was in there, whether it went to the water bank or we're already projecting a very dry year, whether it was going into purchasing the dry water so that their rates may not have to go up, or may not have to have a dry water program this year because it's already in their rates, then that kind of makes sense.
I was asked by the Director of Public Works Authority several times, he says, make sure the water rate has a component in there, in your rate this year, exactly what you said, so you can buy dry water and not us to go back to Board of Supervisors, because every time they go back to them, they have to go and do a public hearing of raising the water rate. And I talked to John Yucasted, who represents 15 small water agencies, he said the same thing. And none of them have anticipated or expect this agency that it's their water. They just want to be us to be capable and able to use this as an insurance policy, to have it available as dry water if this crisis continues on. If we don't, they're going to have to come back. We just can't go and say we decide it's going to be 0.5%. We're going to have to do another public hearing again just to add that 0.5% back into the water rate.
And it's easy to do, but AVEK is fully capable of providing the additional water and selling to our customers, so it's not going to affect the program.
So why don't we hash it over the 0.5%, George? I don't understand that. Nobody's going to die in the audience.
We can buy it out of our present reserves, and they can be sold as needed to the customers.
I don't know. I'm going off of the consultant here, or this thing. It says 2015, 7.75, and we want to drop it. I don't know. I'm not challenging your education, but I'm telling you now, we hired this company to give us a report so we would understand, and these guys work with Metropolitan, Castaic, everybody, their credentials are the highest credentials in consulting when it comes to giving proposed rates, and we are proposing
And
to go
that
up.
0.5%, unless the consultant, but that number comes basically from thin air. I mean, it could be 1%, how much water you want to bank, and they just put some number in there. It would allow some banking, but that could be just as well 1%, it could be 5% at that rate. So there's nothing magical about the 0.5%, other than you're counting there's some dollar amount to do banking. Is it different than that, or is that correct?
No, I mean, it would, like you were mentioning, that more analysis would probably is required, and that would be to get a more substantial number before incorporating into the model.
But you could have used any number, is that correct for that?
We would have talked with the agency before we would.
The 1% or 0.5% doesn't buy much.
In fact,
No, it's not.
Could have been
It's
just
not.
as easy, 2%.
The amount of revenue increase for that 0.5% is roughly $100,000.
But we do not have a program, once that 0.5% is in our water rates, how that water is going to be purchased, who's going to own the water,
We
how
own
it's
the
going to
water.
be sold.
Yeah,
We do not have that set up.
No. We buy the water, we have it available to them, so they don't have to go back to the board and say, oh my God, I need another 500 acre-feet of water, of dry water. And Neil hit the nail on the head with that, because these guys have to go back to like the Board of Supervisors, or the respective boards, they get approval because they have to raise the rate.
Not really, Frank. We can buy, we have the funds to buy what water we need right there, and that can be sold. If there's not ample water, then we open the water bank, and so that's not going to affect.
I have one more, go ahead.
I have two questions. First of all, have we met with our customers and talked to them about this?
Yeah, they all said yes.
Is that
we had a workshop, I think it was last week, and we talked about the 7.25%, and we talked about 0.5% or some percentage to see how receptive they would be. And most customers are pretty receptive, even though it's not going to buy you a lot of water and it's not a lot of money. But I think it kind of gets the thing rolling to where we encourage that process. There were a lot of expectations. Everybody had kind of a different view of how that would play out, how the program would work. I think they would like to see their name on, the acre foot. That's probably not what the board of directors has in mind. So there were a lot of, there were a lot of perceptions and different plans. I mean, I think one encouraging aspect of it is everybody is supportive of doing some kind of program. They recognize we're going to have some agency programs, we're going to have individual programs like we have in the past.
So what percentage of our customers would have, as far as volume?
We had 20 participants, I think, and it was, I would say, probably 90% of our, of the water.
But Ann, does it need to be worked out, how that, with that 0.5%, if we were to go forward with that?
Well, again, I mean, I think the concept is a good concept. I think everybody in the valley recognizes it's a good idea. 0.5%, just to keep in perspective, is $100,000. So that's going to buy you about 400 acre feet. So it's, when you're looking at that chart, it's almost the width of the line. It's to encourage this kind of thing. It's not going to get you there.
What is your recommendation we do?
Can I finish asking my second question? I know we have a representative from Maury County Water Works here, and I hate to put him on the spot, and I won't put you on the spot, except does Maury County Water Works 40 have a preference for what we're doing right now?
Good question. I think Frank and George both have very good points. I think I'm hearing from Frank, we need to get a program started. We need to do this. AVEK, we'd like to see the water get bought and put in the valley. I think George has got a very good point of the details really need to be worked out of it before we have a full-fledged program. I like Dan's point of we need to get something started. We'll be supportive of the 0.5%. I think we would be supportive of a larger percent as well. We're very excited about AVEK taking on the responsibility of banking and very excited about being a partner with you in that. Does that answer your question enough, Rob?
You did it percent now. Just go with the recommendation 7.75, and we can't buy water for 2015. Are we going to use that 0.5% to supplement the water supply for our customers for the dry year water supply? And does that make
There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of assumptions in our budget. There's a lot of assumptions of the rate, how much we're going to sell. And there's a lot of things that are unsure at this point. So, I think the board of directors can structure this however they like. I think if you put 0.5% in, you said this is a line item for water purchases, you probably want to keep that set aside for that purpose.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rich.
And the hard question, what would your recommendation?
He wants to wait for the vote.
I think, the 7.25% is going to keep you on a solid footing. And I think that power costs are going up and so forth. I hate for the board to get too, I think we want to encourage this kind of program. I hate to fall on my sword over 400 acre feet. That's kind of where I'm at, is that if we want to encourage this, I think there are opportunities. I think the State Water Project, I've got 2 meetings next week where we're going to talk about how we're going to structure a 2015 dry year program. So, I think it's good to encourage this. I hate for the board to be so divided on something that is something we want to encourage, but it's not going to get you there, because if we actually have water available, you're going to want to spend more than $100,000 to actually make it work.
We need, I think everybody probably agrees we need to purchase additional water, but we need some rules and mechanics and what to do with it, not just to set that rate. And I've heard some of the water districts, they don't want to have to go back, but we can certainly let our customers know there's some rate that needs to be done, and they may want to consider that in their water rates. But we'll probably have a recommendation to the board if we decide to go with the 7.25 in a future banking rate. We'll probably have a recommendation to the board within 60 days. And if we do the 7.25, and certainly, like I say, we can certainly let the other water agencies know they may want to consider adding something for additional banking rate. but we just don't have those regulations or the mechanics on how that water is purchased is gonna be used.
Can we,
They won't do.
what are our sales, water sales?
Water's is about 16 million.
16 million, can you multiply it times 0.5% for me?
0.5%.
Yeah.
That sounds like what, 800,000?
Yeah, it's not 100,000. Yeah, $800,000. And I'm gonna tell you, we're gonna need it. That's as far as I mean, and I have a consultant here that we hired as a lawyer. And we have a
800,000,
manager, and you know what? The
It's
thing is-
80,000.
80,000, sorry. My, I didn't get my
16
calculator.
million times a 0.5%.
So why are we, then what are we arguing about $80,000?
That's,
I mean,
that's why I hate for the board to be so divided about.
I mean, you know, why don't we have these numbers in front of us? I mean, for $80,000, who cares if it's 7.75%?
That's,
Who cares? You take that 80,000, divide it among all our clients, you're talking 2 cents a person. It doesn't make sense.
That's right, it probably doesn't make sense.
Hey, but our,
We
so
don't,
George,
we don't
you
know.
know what, George, what do we hire him for? And the guy comes out with a program, says it right in a book, 7.75%.
No, that 0.5%, maybe it doesn't make any sense.
That's
Maybe,
the-
maybe it should be 2 or 3%, because 80,000 doesn't buy much right there, so, you know, we're not ready to adopt this, because 80,000, just like you say, it makes no sense. And
I agree with George, we should go back and study that and kind of split the two off a little bit, maybe blend it at some point, but tonight we don't need to have this argument or between ourselves. I think we should go back and look at that issue more. I think it is hugely important to our community and to all of us. And so let's take a couple weeks to look at it a little bit closer and then come back with a recommendation that makes sense.
I don't think the 7.25 is enough, just by itself. I think we do another study right now. I think we're get all the new evidence with the state raising. I've heard power costs right now have gone from 5 to 10%. So I think if we call Edison and get another report, I think that's 7.25. So that's why I don't feel comfortable with the report we got, because this thing has been going on for about 3 months when we've been studying this rate change. And it wasn't like we put 1 or 2 hours in this thing. There was a lot of hours put into this process, and also this PowerPoint display to get here on your tables tonight. And in this thing, it shows, I don't see anywhere, it shows 7.75%, and that's what I was meant to
if you
believe.
don't feel like 7.25, now that's a valid concern, you know. And we should go back and look at it closer, and you could be right.
That's why I said
We're
we
trying to get the best we can, but that's a separate issue, is that 7.25 in as far as the banking. And if that's 7.25, that's what we're relying upon staff of our consultant. And as far as the water banking, that's a separate issue, and we need to look at it. AVEK has the funds to buy the water, and we don't have to have any of our customers contribute towards that, but they would pay for it at the time that the water was extracted. So that's another factor. We need to look at the different factors, because if we start down the road, you know, the 0.5%, you know, we don't have anything. $80,000 is not going to do much towards our program. So are we going to have to make a substantial raise mid-year or someplace during the year, or is AVEK going to have to come in with all of our reserves and contribute a substantial amount? Then you really have a confusion. You have a little bit that customers put in, and you have quite a bit that AVEK has put in, but the 0.5% does not do this program. And so it's either,
I agree with Director Lane. I'm not convinced that we need another 0.5% for water banking. I think we've demonstrated very clearly in the past that we do have the resources to purchase water for banking, and we could spread it and then recover it at a price that is less than what our standard water rates are. We were able to operate our water bank and recover water from it at a lower price than what we can purchase water in Northern California treated.
Well, you heard what he said. If they don't get any water, we had 12,000 or 14,000 acre feet of carryover. we get Zippo next year. And then also, this year we got 5,000 acre feet of water that we got after September 1st.
Yeah, 5%.
How much?
5%.
5%, okay, what is it, 5%. So we already know that we're not gonna get the first part of that equation. So we're gonna be pumping and drilling and spending millions of dollars and putting more wells in the ground. And then the adjudication is gonna be finalized here, and there's gonna be a ramp down here in the next 90 days. And there's no way those reservoirs are gonna fill up in 365 days. Am I correct? Okay, so we're gonna be buying water at $800, $900 acre foot of water, so we're gonna subsidize those too? When do we put a plan together that, so we don't have to continue to dip in somewhere, so we don't get in trouble like other water districts have in the past, and keep us going forward? You know, all I know is, the reason why this banking came in, it wasn't Frank Donato's idea. This came from the audience. It was the purveyors, our clients says, will you guys put in something, a mechanism in there, so we can have dry water available to us? You're the big brother, you're the one supposed to be planning for us, get the job done, and that's what it's all about.
Rate, once you do set the rate, it can become effective
Oh.
soon after that.
Okay, oh, well, 60 days.
I don't care, I think 30,
I know.
But
whatever.
it'll get into the trouble of some of our
Works out for
customers
everybody.
getting it through their process in order to pay by January, so I mean, that's.
Yeah, they'll need lead time to adjust their own rates, and for them, it's tougher than it is for you.
Yes.
We're on the agenda right now for the Board of Supervisors, the last public hearing in 2014, which will be the last Tuesday in November. And we've got to give 45-day notice for our public hearing. So if it gets delayed tonight, we'll be delayed till the 1st of January, or the first public hearing in January. So Mike's right, this is it has an impact on us of when we can get these rates passed on to customers too. But I would just encourage you to do it sooner rather than later.
By October's not a problem.
You would encourage what?
You to have the water rates committee sooner rather than later, as soon as you can.
Well, I'm ready to meet tomorrow, you know, I mean, I'm flexible.
Can we call a special meeting for this issue?
Yeah, that's true.
And then Justin's observation from water rates, help me out. I really think we need to shake out what is the rate we need to just continue paying our costs, and what is an estimated rate we think we would need to do our water banking program, and what customers would support, and get their input on that.
It's probably a question, and it's certainly one way to do it, and commensurate with purchasing, water. Another, way is the agency to use the existing funds, so completely different mechanical ways to accomplish the same thing.
Understood, but what I'm hearing from Frank, and it seems to be that some of our customers, if not many of our customers who use a lot of water, would like the water banking somehow built into the rate, because it's a more effective way for their budget. I don't know.
It may be that they need alternatives right there, and they'd have to budget, very little if AVEK funded the funds right there. And basically, we're using the bank water, we're drawing use, so it would be no money out of the public or the other regional water agencies if we funded the funds in the time there was dry year they needed the water. It'd just be like ordinary purchases, so it would be very little disruption getting the public water.
Then don't they have to go back and ask for emergency funding?
No, because they would just be buying water they would have bought anyway, so, all of that, if we're short of water, we're gonna start using our bank water, and that time,
And we sell at the same rate.
we're gonna sell it to our customers at whatever the rate is at that time, but, so, there's, it keeps it fairly even, keel, nobody's gonna have to go back and raise the rate, substantially. We're the banker in this case, and, we front the money, and we put the water in the ground, then during the dry year, we need to call upon it, then we sell it. It's gonna cause nobody any, hardship, you're not gonna see a spike in rates.
I disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. because our consultant tells us that we're barely making it with 7.25. I came on the premises here today that we should raise it to 7 3/4, whether, whatever, and we put money, line item of money, that's number one. Number two is that we have a policy for banking right now, that's in place. Do we have an MOU, number one, and number two, we have contracts. We have right now 2 contracts, one with Quartz Hill, and we have one with District 40. We have contracts, don't we, with them right now?
Well, both of you and Neil are correct. We have contracts for those that have banked water, but Neil is correct. The water that we've banked, the board hasn't put specific rules on that yet. And that needs to be ferreted out, there's no question.
Rules for the board and not for the public, because they don't care. It's what
Well,
we-
right, how that water would be apportioned to folks, what we would charge, all that, that has yet to be figured out.
Okay, so,
So in Neil's recommendation, he didn't specify a rate increase. It could be 7.75%, could be 7.25 or 7.5. So I think it's a good recommendation. Make a decision tonight.
yeah, well, go ahead. No, I'm not gonna vote for it because I'm going against our consultant, who are the financial people we hired, and our committee chair decided to change the rate tonight on his own without talking to the committee. So that's, I'm letting that know right now. I'm not happy with the way it's done. There was 3 committee members, we came out of that meeting, it was 7 3/4%, and tonight at the meeting, he's decided to go ahead and make a recommendation against our, he just said it, against the state, so go ahead, and that's fine.
A decision,
I'm just putting that for the record.
a decision hasn't been made yet. We could decide to go with 7 3/4.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I think that Director Romano already has made the motion at 7.75%.
We'll wait until the hearing is closed.
That's when that motion.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to go with 7.5?
A compromise might work.
I'm
Very possibly
just
so.
arguing back and forth, not getting there. I kind of agree that we ought to put it off, but
Any more comments from board members? Okay, now at this point in the hearing, I'd like to ask for comments from the public. Yes, Mr. Seaton.
Good evening. This has bugged me a lot. I've been on a number of boards. There's a few of you here that I've been on the same board with you. One thing I've noticed in boards, they hire consultants. They have committees. If you listen to what is said, they recommend. They don't dictate. And all it does is make the rest of the board impotent when you sit there. Yes, you should listen to them. Then you make your own decision, because you're looking at a much broader situation than just a committee. You bring more into it. I've heard it from a few of you tonight. And like I said, it's bugging the hell out of me, because I can see you're not going to make another decision if you extend this out. Neil said it very well. Your minds are set. You know what it is to change someone's mind. It ain't going to happen. So I don't care what the hell you do, but let's do something. And like I said, you take into consideration what the consultant says, what the committee says, then you make your decision from that. Thank you.
Thank you to our consultant and committee, that I make a recommendation we go to the 7.75 rate.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to raise our water rates by 7.75% effective January 1st, 2015. Any more comments? Yes, Rob.
Is that understood that 7.25 would be, or 0.5% would be dedicated to water bank at that rate?
It's whatever the board wants to do with it. I think
But I
that's,
mean, if that's
yes,
what we're
yeah,
voting on,
yeah,
is
yeah.
that the understanding?
yeah, I wanted to include that as well.
so we'll hold it off on the water.
No, that's fine. I just want to go with the 7.75, whether we decide, I think what's happening is we're reading too much into this. We make a decision what the water rate should be, and what the cost of inflation is, and what the cost of doing business, and the cost right now is 7.75.
Any more comments?
Well, in the first committee, we talked about 7.25 and 7.75. The other 0.5% was component for, water banking, so, when we first came in, it was a 7.25, was a recommendation to staff. And it was asked that, if the water banking portion was put in there, we'd go to 7.75. And Right now, it's not specified, we have no rules and regulations. If we have another 0.5% for purchased, water, who's gonna own that water, how it's gonna be allocated, and we're just ahead of the game. Our consultant has said 7.25% meets our present cost, and the others for banking, and we don't have our rules and regulations for that. And if the 7.25 is not correct to meet our cost, that could be, and I don't know, our staff, our consultants work together, and they use the best information they had. And again, the electrical rates could be higher, but that was supposed to be factored in. But it's a budget, and you don't know exactly what it's going to be. So that's a possibility. We won't know for some time how accurate that is. But 7.25 that meets our budget, and anything above that should be looked at either by the entire board or by the committee and studied and have a thorough recommendation so there's not confusion. Right now, if that's used for purchased water, there's going to be confusion in there. So if the board's going to vote on that 7.75, I hope they do it in conjunction with purchasing and operating our plant, not additional water, because we're not ready to have that in this motion at this time. I don't know if it's specified.
Radio spots are getting ready to start, so the publicity's going on, the program's pretty well set. Right now, we're currently working on exhibitors to be at the expo. We'll have a committee meeting this Friday, and they'll look over a preliminary list, so if you have any ideas of anybody who you might want to have in the expo.
Now, will you buy a booth?
Well, this year, because it's the first year, the booth spaces are free, so just to participate and be there, we're giving them, there's not going to be no curtains and drapes or anything like that. They'll have a table and chairs and they can set up for, and so we've got the landscapers, and we've got the nurseries, and we've got building suppliers, and we've got a fairly extensive list. There's always somebody we forget, so if you have any ideas, just kind of shoot it our way of somebody else that might need to be there. Like I say, we're having a meeting, it sounds really good. We're having a meeting on Friday, and it's like, I'm not sure what we really, the planning process is almost moving, it's the implementation. So there's always going to be little things that come up, but I think it's going to be a short meeting on Friday because we're kind of down the road quite a ways to have things going pretty well. So any comments you have on that, just let us know, especially like I say, the exhibitors is kind of who we're looking for and for that. So that's the expo, as we're calling it now. The fair came up with that. I think that's a great term for it because we're having a hard time with conference, workshop, and we came up with that.
Jump right into the water supply. Oroville's at 49% historical levels, San Luis is at 47%. This is not a picture of today. This is what it looks like today. So, yeah, very, very drastic difference between last year at Oroville and the pictures taken this year. So again, Oroville is 49% at historical levels, San Luis is at 47%. This is the reservoir conditions. Again, the little red line is historical average, so you can see that all these reservoirs are way below average for this time of year.
I don't think Castaic has been, I don't know what it's ever done.
Yeah, in fact, actually, what's happening at Castaic, because Castaic is pumped in there, and usually you keep it pretty full.
Yeah.
Metropolitan has, and other terminal contractors have an opportunity to borrow water out of storage, and that's kind of what's happening at Castaic, is they're borrowing water out of, they call it flexible storage out of Castaic.
Did you see most of the water right now is for basically fire protection, public health and safety?
They asked, because we are supposed to submit our request for 2015 on October 1st, and that was one of the things they asked us. What are you going to need for fire protection, health and safety for next year? I think what you're looking at right now is if we don't get a big year, we're going to be looking at pretty tight.
Did you put it for 50,000 for the water?
What's that?
50,000?
50,000?
For public health and safety.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know what number. Because they figure 55 55 gallons per person per day. And they say, okay, well, consider all your local sources. How much is that 55 gallons?
Prisoners get 200 gallons per day per prisoner.
Yeah.
I know that. 200 gallons a day per prisoner.
Here is,
I'd be happy to sell it to us. That's our water bill right there. Here's our water bill. What are we dealing with?
this is Northern Sierra. 55 gallons per person per day, yes.
God, you know what? How long will that last me through?
Is that include the shower?
That's supposed to be everything, cooking, shower. Yeah. So this is Northern Sierra, you know, where officially the water year goes from October 1st to the end of September, so we're approaching the end of the official water year. So it looks like we're going to end up at 29.7 or very close to that, which you can see is about half. Well, average is about 50. And so this is what the precipitation for the aid station index is, which is a measure of Northern Sierra. This is what it was for the San Joaquin precipitation. So percent to date is about 48% of average. This is Oroville storage. Still slipping a little bit, but at least flattening out a bit. This is San Luis. Actually, maybe we've hit the bottom in San Luis and start to turn the corner a little bit. This chart I haven't shown the board in a while. This is this shows all the I think it's 100 years of record, and it shows each one of those dots is the precipitation total for those individual years. You can see where 2014 is going to land in that chart. So very close to record levels as far as precipitation. The next chart, this is actual runoff. This is Sacramento Valley runoff from 1906 to 2014. And you can see that it looks like 2014 is going to be like the fourth driest runoff. So again, precipitation might be a little higher than that, but the runoff is really what fills right there. You get a super dry year and it draws it down. The next year draws it down even worse. In '78, it bounced right back. That's what I'm hoping for this year. But in other years, it didn't always bounce back. 1991 didn't bounce back quite as fast. So kind of an interesting look at historical numbers for portable storage. Water banking. One thing that we're trying to get as many assets online for next year if we need to tap into them, and I discussed with the board the different levels we had. We do have a piece of property we call Bench Ranch, and the board has already approved a budget for that to do well drilling and so forth. At this point, we're ready to go out to bid. Normally, I would come to the board and say, we're ready to go out to bid, can I get approval? I think it's kind of an extra step. If there aren't any objections, we'd like to just go ahead and keep this on the fast track and go out to bid. The board will come back. I mean, when we get bids, you'll have an opportunity to look at bids, see if they're responsible and select them. So I guess if there aren't any reservations or any objections by board members, we'll go ahead and give Kenny Jinks the okay to advertise the drilling report.
I think that's a good idea. We're trying to expedite this project. We need development soon.
Yeah. Other items on water banking, again, the domestic wells are going to 80th and H, and that's a picture of the tank. I think most of you probably been out to that 80th and H. That's our chlorination disinfection tank. And the ag wells are going to the west region. State Water Project, there has been a lot of discussion on the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, and as I mentioned to the board, initially they were going to allocate based on Table A, which means AVEK would have been the third largest participant. And it could be, it's either you're on or off, you're in or out. Well, since then, they've come up with an opportunity to maybe be partially in and partially out. So I'm going to a meeting next week to kind of identify what costs are, and I want to be able to present to the board kind of what the price points of some of these programs are. So we will have an opportunity to maybe participate at 50% level or 20% level. And also, this new plan gives us a lot more flexibility on how we would handle our water. In the past, we've had a lot of trouble even making exchanges between AVEK and Palmdale Water. We've had to go through a lot of hoops with the state, and they've said we're going to streamline that process. So we will have a Table A and a yield from this project that we will have a lot more flexibility with. It also is going to give us access. In fact, when you look, this is Banks Pumping Plant. If you look at this plant, the State Water Project doesn't see AVEK as owning a piece of that. It's a water supply contract, and so we're all in this together, and we get a piece of our Table A. The canal or the twin tunnels, they're talking about actually giving you a slice of the tunnel. So that again is maybe a commodity that we can exercise for transfers and exchanges and so forth. So bottom line is it gives us a lot more opportunities.
If they give us,
They had a whole lot of different options, a lot of different proposals. I mean, even the last document, they changed, I think they actually really radically changed the whole concept, where initially they had 5 diversion points along in the delta. They've eliminated 2 of those, and I think they only had 2. And initially they were going to pump the water down to Clifton Court, and now they're going to take the water out of the river and have gravity, basically, or have a suction kind of situation where the water, so they save a lot of energy. So they've refocused and redone the project a couple of times. So now they've kind of nailed it down and said, okay, this is our best alternative, and we need to move forward with this one. So I will be able to give you a definition. And, you know, I mean, all of these costs are, there's a lot of assumptions, a lot of estimates, and this is going out quite a ways, but they have come up with some numbers for us. And I will be able to say, this is what AVEK's exposure would be. Then you can kind of make a decision, well, you know, we're not going to be able to handle that. We want a lower participation. Or you may say, you know, we think that there's some benefits in there for our agency. We want to maybe participate even at a higher level. And those options will be available to us. Numbers are dropping just a little bit. Quartz Hill, we're doing 15 MGD, Roseman 5.5, East Side 1.5, our Palmdale connection at 1 MGD. We're continuing at Pumpkin 7 acre-feet at 96th Street East, and our water banking extractions are 13 MGD. So, and we're using the ag wells to feed the rest meters, which is kind of what we've been. John, any other operational issues?
Is the 13 million gallons lower demand or just lower function?
Lower than that.
Good question.
Status and updates, I do have a project status update for you. One item that I'd like to mention there, you know, we've been concerned about the Town and Country plan, and we wanted to be engaged in that. We sent a letter into the county. We did get a response from Supervisor Antonovich, and then we also got a draft of the staff report. I think I'm going to have Dwayne kind of give a quick report on that.
Yes, the actual staff report that responded to our request established a policy for the Antelope Valley plan that would essentially, the wording is exactly, the wording is under policy COS 3-6, support and encourage water banking facilities throughout the Antelope Valley, including within the significant ecological areas. That's a policy of the general plan, which is, in essence makes water banking facilities allowable use